Hello, everyone. I'm Joel Baird, the General Manager of Missoula Community Access Television. Thanks for joining us for another installment on our interviews with candidates for City Council in the 2015 election. In the studio with me now is Jack Rowan. He is a candidate for Ward 2. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So you briefly went over the questions. I'm asking the same questions of all the candidates, just really to give them an opportunity in a quieter setting than a public forum, you know, to say different things about their campaign. And so the first question is, Jack Rowan, what motivates you to run for office?
Well, there's a number of things. One is that I've been in Missoula for over 20 years now.
Yeah, we were talking about some shared history. Like,
exactly, the Crystal Theater and lots of things. So, good things. And that's what I've been involved in a number of things in Missoula across the community. And so I feel like I can bring a depth and breadth of experience to what's important to Missoulians and what's carried over time that we've been wanting to work on and trying to realize over the decades. And with the current council, there's only one seat in which an incumbent is running again. That's Patrick. Otherwise, all of the other seats are open.
Over, isn't it?
Exactly. And so I think that this is particularly, I feel motivated to run right now because I see a big changeover, and I think the experience that I have in Missoula, as well as all the different organizations that I've been involved with, have given me an opportunity to really bring something forward that I think will help carry us forward into a better future.
Okay, and that dovetails perfectly into why do you think you are qualified? Because you mentioned being, having that 2-decade overview of the growth in the city and things that have happened, and also that you've been a part of a lot of organizations.
Yes, so I've been very much involved with the Missoula Urban Demonstration Project from early on. Or early on for me, I should say, because it goes back to the 80s. But I've also been involved with the North Missoula Community Development Corporation. We do a lot of work on community development. We run the Missoula Outdoor Cinema. We also have a number of land trust housing projects. So making sure that we have affordable housing in Missoula is something that's critical to me, and it's a critical element to the organizations that I've been involved with. I also work with Family Promise, which is an organization trying to help provide temporary housing for homeless families. There's a lot of issues that we've made progress on, but I like to see us do more at. One of the challenges of affordable housing is making sure that it's something people can afford to get into, but then we have the question of actually being able to stay in it as well.
Yeah.
So that's something I really want to work on. I think land trust housing is one way we can do that. There's some other ways that we can work at making sure that houses stay affordable into the future, and it's not just for the first generation of buyers.
Yeah, and then people that don't know about the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, the NMCDC.
Good.
You mentioned the land trust, for instance, and that's where people buy the home without having to entail the land underneath it, right?
Exactly. So that's one way that we can make sure we keep the house affordable into the future is that, the homeowners only own the structure, and we hold the land in trust. So we're not making a profit on it. We're holding that as a way to contain the cost and to make sure that the next, when somebody's ready to move on to another house, that the next person who comes in can still afford to live there.
Because that land part of the equation has been satisfied by the nonprofit, public benefit charitable organization like the NMCDC.
Exactly. And another thing that I've been involved in that has helped with that idea of helping to keep homes affordable for people is I was involved with a home resource from the very beginning. I'm not working there now. I have my own business that I'm running, but all the way through the early years, I helped to run the store, and that was another great way to really meet a broad group or a broad swath of Missoula community. From people who have a home that they're just looking to fix up and trying to get it back to a period piece, to other people who need a door for tonight.
And they can't afford it.
And
right?
exactly.
You're not going to buy a brand new one.
Exactly. So that way, Home Resource has been an incredible asset for Missoula in terms of helping people to be able to afford things and also keep things that are perfectly usable out of the landfill.
Right.
So those kind of commitments to not just affordability, but building a better future in which we're not throwing away things, that we recognize the value of what we have and build on that is one of the things that's really critical to me. And I think I can bring that to the City Council and add that to what's already there.
I gotcha. what will your priorities be if you are elected?
So one thing I've already talked about quite a bit is affordable housing, and I really think that that is a critical thing. There's a lot of discussion about raising the minimum wage, and I do support that. I think that's something we really need to look at. I also recognize that as a city government, we have limited means to really affect that because of state law. But I also recognize that the minimum wage people earn is really only part of the equation. There's all the other things that go on to making it affordable to live here in Missoula. And so housing is one of those things. Transportation is another thing that's very important to me. I'm a strong proponent for trying to build within the urban core of what we already have. So having the Department of Environmental Quality declare that the White Pine Sash site needs to be cleaned up to residential standards is tremendous, because that's a huge chunk of Missoula land that's already within the urban core. We already have bus systems, we have services there. And to be able to develop that as housing and do some innovative things to really keep it affordable and build it within an existing neighborhood is tremendous. Yeah. There's also other places like the Sawmill District, and there's some projects going on there that I think Homeward is doing some great work in terms of creating some affordable housing there. So I like the idea of trying to, I'm a very strong proponent of building within the structure that we already have, because oftentimes when we end up building homes further and further out, we exchange the cost, maybe be able to build some cheaper homes, but we then build in a huge cost of transportation of people having to drive everywhere they go, which has environmental impacts as well as financial impacts. So I want to work on building within that core and working on the system that we have to try to develop some more bike trails so that people can commute as well as recreate. And work with Mountain Lion. The Zero Fare program has been a tremendous asset. But we have, particularly in Ward 2, we have 3 neighborhoods that don't have bus service. So that's something I really want to work on, is helping to develop the funding so that we can extend bus service to those neighborhoods as well. Yeah,
because the Zero Fare, right, is on a limited schedule. It's not Zero Fare forever.
Exactly.
But it's for the next few years or something.
Yes, I have to check on that, how many years it is. Yeah. But there's dedicated funding for, I believe it's a 5-year program, but I'll have to check on that. So there's a lot of work to be done to see what we can do to make sure that that funding stays there long term. And a big part of that is building partnerships. Working with businesses to help them recognize, like, well, you can either build a bigger parking lot, or we can work together to try to develop some other ways of helping the people who work for you get there and have a good life. So, right. So those are probably the biggest issues I think that I would like to, I see myself working on. I mentioned a little bit earlier too, homelessness is something that we still have a challenge with here in Missoula. We've made a lot of progress, and the city is already doing a good amount of work on there, but it's mostly nonprofits. And so I want to work on continuing to build those partnerships that are going to help us address that, because that's a fundamental part of our community too, that everybody feels valued and everybody recognizes that if they want a home, that they have access to that. And right now there's still a segment of our society that doesn't have that. Yeah. I mean, your ward in particular, right, was cited and was kind of a motivation for the creation of the NMCDC, was that it had the lowest home ownership rate of all the wards in the city. Exactly. At that time. I don't know. I'm sure it's changed. It's starting to change, yeah. And I think some of the projects we've done have helped with that. Missoula Housing Authority has also done some great things. But yeah, so it started to change, but I think we can keep building on that. We have some momentum, and I think that's a great example that you brought up. Yeah. I mean, your ward is interesting. I'll give you a little more time because I don't want to rush through. So I thought I'd ask you, in general, what would you say about your ward having such a concentration? Like, it's got the north side. Does it have the west side? Does it go all the way out to the Grand Creek? It does, yeah. So actually, Ward 2 now has changed just over the last 10 years. The north side is actually no longer part of Ward 2. It's actually in Ward 1. So, yeah, and that's a fairly recent change that it's happened that way. Yeah. So the ward has continued to move westward, and it's not even all of the west side now. It's actually most of the historic west side. Yeah. And then it goes out Mullen Road, North Reserve, There's a big group of homes on Expressway, or just off of Expressway, that are part of Ward 2, and then on up into Grant Creek. So in many ways, it's 4 really distinct neighborhoods, even 5 distinct neighborhoods that are all kind of grouped together into this one ward. So it makes it pretty challenging to try to represent, a really broad swath of Missoula. But I see that's part of the nature of serving on city council, is that you're elected to represent a ward, but also to represent the best interests of the whole city.
Sure.
So it makes it really interesting to go from one neighborhood to another and talk to people about what's their biggest concerns. Transportation is one of the things that comes up constantly, but on the historic west side, it's mostly about sidewalks and people, young families who want to be able to go down the street and not have to walk in the middle of the street. We call it the West Side Walk, is to walk in the middle of the street.
Because that place never got them, right? The west side was always kind of, well, we'll do sidewalks later. People are not that interested.
Exactly. Yeah, it was one of the older neighborhoods that didn't have a lot of retrofitting for sidewalks.
Yeah.
And so there's places where you have a sidewalk for 50 feet and then it ends.
Right.
Or in another place where it may be the entire block, but at the end there's an 18-inch drop-off instead of. So it makes it pretty challenging.
And that's really interesting. So your ward includes like the big box stores and all of the apartment housing that grew up right to the east and the west of Reserve Street. And then there's a huge neighborhood. Sometimes when I'm taken to the airport, we go through those airport neighborhoods.
Exactly.
I had no idea this stuff was here.
Yeah.
And there's miles of it.
It is.
Small ranch-like houses. And then Grant Creek has some large structures, people on 1 acre and so on.
Yeah, and then even Grant Creek has a few dense apartment complexes as well, right at the base of Grant Creek. So so each of the neighborhoods have some things in common, but are also kind of a little bit physically isolated from each other. So that's one of the challenges that anybody faces representing it. But I think it's also an opportunity for us to really look at what can we do to, when I go through the neighborhood off of Expressway, sometimes it's called Potterville, because a lot of the streets are named after Harry Potter characters.
Oh, I see. No, I was thinking of It's a Wonderful Life.
That's what I thought at first too. I was like, wow, that's an interesting. But yeah, it's because of the Harry Potter books, and it's in many ways it's probably one of the most isolated neighborhoods because there's the Big Sky Brewery and then there's a travel plaza, and that's really about the only services it has. Right. So when I go through there, a lot of times what people are really focusing on is that they just don't even feel like they're part of Missoula. Mm-hmm. So I think building more trails, getting the bus system there, doing some things that will help people feel like they're really a part of our community, and that way, and that they're being heard, I think is really critical, and it's something that I've been concentrating on.
Wow, you're going to have to bike around a lot if you get this job. Okay,
I'm up for it, though.
Number 4. What does the future of Missoula look like to you?
Excellent question. And I think I've been talking about that quite a bit. I see the future of Missoula as being more contiguous, a lot of development linking all of these neighborhoods together. I see more trail systems that I think are critical. When I'm out talking with people, that's one of the things. There are certain neighborhoods off of Reserve Street where there's only one arterial road, and so when people are dropping off their kids at school or going to work and coming home, and those intersections just become kind of a nightmare. Well, one way we can try to address that is to provide more bus service and more trails so that people have more options for how and that way we're not always trying to build more roads, because those always bring along consequences with them. So that's a big part of what I see as the future of Missoula. I think also just continuing to, we always have to be careful about how we spend our resources, both in terms of tax revenue as well as how we use the infrastructure that we have. But I fundamentally see these things as investments in our future. So as long as we make those choices in a way that we are looking at how we're moving forward together and how everything we do can be of benefit to the whole community rather than just maybe say one business or one neighborhood, that we build that sense of community. And that's something I think we have in Missoula, and I'd like to see us build more of that. And I think that's a big part of how I see the future of Missoula is a more cohesive, feeling that in all of our individuality, but we have a lot in common, and that we're building it together.
Okay. Oh,
that maybe sound pie in the sky, but I like it.
I see what you mean, though, too, because as I mentioned to you, it was only by being taken to the airport by the airport shuttler, right, where you say, oh, we have some stops to make. This, because you and I have both lived in town for decades, and you get kind of caught, you're doing the same thing. Like, I often think in the wintertime, if we were some sort of marmots, there'd be these deep grooves of like the 3 places we go, or whatever.
Exactly.
So when you look at town, you see how varied it is in terms of its architecture, its classes, its income levels, and the priorities there. So it does seem like Missoula will start to come together if it's really going to reach populations level suggested by that growth policy that
Exactly.
the Office of Development just said. I don't remember the year. I was talking to Bill Murray about it. I thought I had read 114,000 people in the city limits within 2025.
That's what I think it is,
something like
2025. And then that's, that's
kind of
amazing.
A shocker.
It is
Right.
a shocker, yeah.
Yeah, because when we came here, it was like, I came here to 50,000.
Exactly. That's what it was when I got here, too, yeah. So, and yeah, it's amazing to go out to the airport and to see places where it's like, wow, that was a field a year ago. And now not only, there's somebody living there, a bunch of people
some of
living
them, a bunch of those houses right by the airport. I've lost track of time, darn it. What haven't we touched upon that you would like to touch upon? And then Scott's going to stand up and tell me how many minutes we have left. 5.
All right, okay. Well, one thing that I have also been trying to highlight, one thing that's very important to me is, last year there was a lot of attention paid to sexual assault and what we do to address that, and particularly at the university and the city level and the county. Most of the emphasis was on how we deal with sexual assaults once they're reported and how it's investigated, how it's prosecuted, and so forth. What I think we haven't done as much on is trying to look at the reasons why we still have sexual assaults and what we can do to try to reduce the number of assaults that happen. So that's another thing where I see the city could play a very critical role in working with the university to continue some of the programs that they're doing to try to encourage and train people on how to intervene in situations. There's organizations in town like NCBI, the National Coalition Building Institute, that has some great programs. So I would love to see the city do more to work with some of these organizations that already have that expertise. And how can we get more word out there to address the issue so that everybody in Missoula feels safe and feels respected and feels like they can really be a part of the community that we're building.
That's great. Well, Jack, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
You know it. Good luck on your campaign.
Thank you, Missoula.
Thank you for joining us here at MCAT for our 2015 interviews with candidates for City Council. I just want to remind you that the vote is on, and you'll be receiving a mail-in ballot this year. If you do not receive the ballot, by mid-October, please contact Missoula County Elections Office to make sure that you're registered, they have the right address, and so on, so you can participate in this year's election for City Council members. Well, as always, for MCAT, I'm Joel Baird. Thank you for joining us.